Hey, welcome to Madhouse Magazine Radio Hour, and today we are spotlighting Sammy Davis Jr. That's right. You know, we usually do rock and roll. This time, we're going back a little. And you know why we're doing this today? It's in honor of Black History Month. Today's February 28th, the last day of the month. So we are actually going to do a celebration. We kind of did, because you notice we did Billy Preston. Mm-hmm. He's black. Who else did we do in this month? Neil Diamond.
He's black.
And, you know, and I spoke about a lot of this stuff. Growing up in the black neighborhood, I talked about Black History Month and Shirley Chisholm and all that. And growing up in this poor, terrible neighborhood. And you want to know how terrible the neighborhood was? You know how in New York City, Manhattan, every corner there's a Dwayne Reed drugstore? Right. In my neighborhood, it was Dwayne Can't Read.
That's so
I stole that from Bello today. He told me that this morning.
How dare you blame me for that one?
I got another one waiting, too, in the wings. So Bello's officially my writer now. So we're going to do Sammy Davis Jr. because he was such a big part. He was so instrumental in the black movement, if you will. Stephen had a black movement today. That's why he had to go to the doctor. You get it?
I get
it. So he was probably the most influential black entertainer of all time.
Is that true?
Yes, we're going to get to all of this, you know, and as he described himself, you know how he described himself?
The Candyman?
No, as a one-eyed Jew Negro.
Oh,
that's how he described
awesome.
himself.
He actually said that?
Yeah, he would make jokes about it and stuff.
Yes.
So he did it all. He was like a five-tool player. He was the Willie Mays of entertainment, if you will. And we're going to get to all of that. We're going to discuss everything about his life. And we're going to talk about everything that we loved in the 70s. Because Sammy was everywhere in the 70s, of course. You know, everywhere you looked, there was Sammy. Yeah. And, of course, we're going to talk about All in the Family.
Oh, that's
and all of our favorite shows from the 70s. We're going to talk about Good Times, all that stuff.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about whether this is going to be Cha-Cha's last show or not. She gave her notice.
Wow.
So we're going to have to discuss that and we'll be taking applications. Anyone listening, send in your applications. We'll discuss that. I know what we're going to do a long distance shout out. So you know who we're going to do a shout out to? Heather Locklear, because she's in the news that she's gone crazy. She's spinning off the rails. That she was arrested again. And domestic abuse. She bit her boyfriend's nose. And then when the cops came to arrest her, she called the female cop the C word and kicked the male cop in the nuts.
I didn't know it was a female.
Isn't she married to Richie Sambora?
Yeah. All right. So 1982. Is this 1982 right
now?
now?
Oh, they're divorced?
And let me break the news to you. Sammy Davis is no longer married to Altonvis either. You know, this is 2018.
Breaking my heart.
Cha-cha. we got the snow
this is
tires
why I'm
on.
leaving the show.
We got the snow tires on. Don't worry.
You'll lose the house.
You mean the chains?
Yeah. So Heather Locklear is spiraling out of control. So, you know, she's got a lot of DWIs, a lot of substance abuse, a lot of problems. When beauty fades, all hell breaks loose. Yep. So, you know, what are you going to do? Yeah. She was quite the beautiful actress back in the day. Yes.
She was beautiful.
So, that's what I heard. I was laughing at her Howard Stern today. He was saying that's why it's sometimes a blessing to look like me, because then you have nowhere to fall because you're so ugly to begin with. Yeah, right. You can't get any worse.
I heard him say something about I wish Beth would bite my nose off.
What? I wish he'd bite his nose off.
Right, like Heather Locklear. No one gets riled up enough either way to bite his nose. So let's start the show off with some songs going out to Heather Locklear. And you know who else I'm going to dedicate these songs to? Nipsey Russell and Slappy White.
All right.
And we're going to play The Candyman by Sammy Davis Jr. And this one here that I have in my possession, I'll show it to you later when we come back from the break, but it's going to be Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul. You know that song?
Yeah.
Sure.
Me. All right. Go out. Let's play the music.
Reason
and we'll be
number 2.
right back. 474 The Mix. Hey, welcome back. Madhouse Magazine Radio Hour on 474 The Mix. And we just played The Candyman by Sammy Davis Jr., of course. And then we played Me and Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul. Like I said, go and get your album because I have it right here. Look at that classic 70s soul right there. Exactly. So, those are two awesome songs. So now let's get into it and let's start talking about Sammy Davis. You know anything about Sammy, Stephen Bello?
Well, I know he was on the Wheel of Fortune once. And he said, I'd like to buy an eye. I've been using that joke since 1979.
That's going to be good. Yes, I expect a lot of Sammy jokes today. So.
No,
Yeah.
I don't really know too much
All
about
right,
it.
so I'm going to tell you everything I know about him. Samuel George Davis Jr., born December 8th, 1925 in Harlem, New York City. And, of course, he was in vaudeville as a child. I saw a video of him as, like, 6 months old tap dancing. It was awesome. He was a child. He couldn't walk, but he could tap dance. Wow. That's how good he was, right? So he started this trio with his uncle and his dad called the William Matson Trio, and Sammy was the star, and they were everywhere going around in vaudeville, and he did everything. Sammy was. That's why I said he's the most influential entertainer of all time in the black world. That he did everything, and he broke down walls, broke down doors. He did everything. He was the first at a lot of stuff. So let me tell you what he did. He was a dancer, a singer, an actor, a comedian, and he played musical instruments too. He was very adept playing the flugelhorn, Stephen, of course. Yes, another guy.
He's a triple threat.
No, that was
Quadruple.
5 tools. That's why I said
Wow.
he's a 5-tool player because that's how they describe it in baseball. If you're the best baseball player, like Willie Mays, you can do everything: run, throw, catch, hit for power, speed, blah 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 blah.
What are you?
So you're a 5-tool player in baseball.
Tool.
So we can call Sammy a 5-tool.
Wow.
Got it.
So he had a very successful career. And, back then when he was starting out, there's a lot of racism going on. And
Really?
his parents, his father protected him from that,
Aw.
So, but they played all over. And it was I heard a lot of things. It was very sad, like back in the day, that they would be playing at these casinos, but they couldn't stay at the casino.
Wow.
They had to go to the bad side of town and go next to the Dwayne Can't Read and go to that Fleabag Motel there and stay.
Right.
And then, during intermissions, they couldn't even stay in there. They had to go out and wait by the pool, they said.
Oh, man. That's ridiculous.
Right. So, but Frank Sinatra took him under his wing.
Yeah.
They actually became friends early on. And later on, of course, he was a part of that Rat Pack.
Right.
Can you name the Rat Pack members? Let's go. We got Frank Sinatra,
Dean
Martin, Sammy Davis,
Joey Bishop.
Joey Bishop, and one more guy.
Come on.
Peter Lawford. And nobody
wow.
knows why Peter Lawford was part of it.
Yeah.
Because he was an actor. But I think they let him in because he had an in with the Kennedys. That I think, I'm not even sure of the relationship, but it was something with a guy named Sergeant Shriver. And somehow, yeah, they were
okay.
into
Wow.
it. You know him?
Well, isn't he what's her name? Maria
Marilyn Monroe?
No, Maria Shriver. Isn't
Oh,
that
yeah,
her
I guess
guy?
that's where it came from.
Yeah.
Okay.
She had a
Right.
Kennedy
There you
thing.
go.
Yes, there you
All
go.
right.
That's
So
it.
then he was signed to the Decca label, and he was one of the first people to be on this label. And he would play everywhere, every big club, that they normally wouldn't let black performers perform. He would be there. Like
Wow.
one place, huge place that he played at was called Bellows Boom Boom Room down in
Bellows Boom Boom
in Harlem. It was a big place.
I remember that. I didn't know he
remember?
played
Oh,
there.
that's an awesome name.
That's where we met. Remember?
Yeah.
So anyway, now he only had one eye. That was very famous. We all knew that, right? But does anybody know how he lost his eye? I never knew this until
Running with scissors? Like your mom used to always
he got a BB gun for Christmas.
That's how everybody lost their eye.
I never thought about it.
Yeah. So one day he was driving his car down to Las Vegas or whatever, this brand new Cadillac that he bought with all this money he was making. And he got into a car accident. Back then, they had these huge cars, right?
Right.
And on the
Right.
steering wheel was like a big spike hanging out of it.
I know.
It was like an emblem, but it was like a spike.
On the
Right.
steering wheel.
steering
Wow.
Yeah, so like the car in front of him swerved and stopped, and he hit it back into the back of it, and his eye went into it. Probably didn't have a seatbelt on.
Damn.
And this
Did
is
they
the
even have seatbelts?
this is the worst story I ever heard. He was out on the side of the road. Witnesses said with his eye dangling like those joke eyes. He was trying to put it back into his eye socket.
Oh.
Yeah.
How old was he?
Wow.
7. No, he was actually at age 30 at this time.
So he was
my
famous at the
Lord.
time.
Oh yeah.
Oh, man, I
So
didn't know
yeah, that's why he thought it was tragic, because he thought it was going to ruin his career. He didn't
Yeah.
think he could dance. He'd be like dancing in a circle. You know,
Yes,
he couldn't.
yes.
Oh my God, Cha-Cha is destroying the entire set now. So,
Wasn't me.
yeah. So anyway,
Wow, I
he
didn't know that.
had surgery, and he wore an eye patch for a long time. And then eventually he came back, his big return to the stage, and it was the biggest event in Vegas. Every star was there, you name it. Ethel Merman was there.
That's
Lou
huge.
Grant, Don Rickles. I can't even think of the names.
Mrs. Garrett.
Yes.
They were all there.
Chico and the man were both
Nice,
there.
very
Yeah.
nice.
So it was very emotional that people were weeping when he came back, and
Wow.
he brought the house down, as they used to say back then. But he had a weakness. And you know what that weakness is?
Women?
White women.
Oh,
Yes.
that's always
Wow.
trouble.
That'll bring you down back then. Now
Yeah.
listen to this. He was dating Kim Novak, a very big star
Oh,
at the
wow.
time, right?
Is she white?
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, this story wouldn't have made any sense whatsoever.
I just wanted to make sure it started that way.
Yes.
Okay.
So she was, a famous actress working for Columbia, and the Columbia studio boss, his name was Harry Cohn. And he put a contract out on Sammy.
Ooh,
He went to his mafia friends, and they came over to Sammy and said, "You stop dating this woman, or we're going to put your other eye out, or we're going to break your
snap.
legs,
And
or
they
we'll just
don't
kill
play.
you." Right.
Yeah.
And they told him, Sammy, what's his name? Harry Cohn said to Sammy, "You have 48 hours to marry a black girl, or we're sicking these guys on you."
Nice.
Serious, right?
Oh, the
So-
good
Wow.
old days.
So, oh my God. Can you imagine this went on? And, look at Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein's tame compared to this
Yeah.
guy,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
They were always despicable. That's why I always said people in Hollywood have always been despicable, will always be despicable.
And forcing them to get
You
married.
did always
Exactly.
say that.
Right. That people are always gushing about them. Oh, they're so wonderful. And I was like, no, not only are they not as good as us, they're much worse than
Oh,
us.
absolutely.
Like you put them on this pedestal, but they belong on the floor,
Yeah.
trampled and spit
Absolutely.
upon.
No
So anyway.
morals, no.
Yeah. So anyway, he goes through his little black book, if you will, and he finds like this girl he used to date, and he told her, "All right, I got to get married. So will you marry me? I'll give you $10,000, all the shoes you can wear,
Wow.
and all this." Her name was Lorraine White, and yeah.
And she
so-
was black.
Yes.
What was the middle name? Ink? Oh, that's horrible. That's so funny.
So
Wow.
anyway, so the night of the wedding, his friends recalled that Sammy got really drunk, and the woman was crying, and Sammy goes into the other room, and his friend comes in after a while, and Sammy's there with a loaded gun to his head, and the guy has to wrestle the gun away from him.
Wow. She must have been
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
then,
gosh.
anyway, fast forward 9 months later, and they get divorced.
Oh, I thought you said they were gonna they had a baby.
No, not at this
Oh,
time. No.
okay.
So
Wow,
yeah, his career's
Sammy's
going. He's
life
still
is
going.
crazy.
This is when the Rat Pack is going on.
Right.
He's solo. He's no longer with his father and uncle act at this point. He's solo, right? And so he's very involved with JFK. He supports JFK being elected, and he's involved in civil rights and all of this stuff. And then, of course, his weakness comes back to haunt him once again. It's I think she was Swedish. Her name was Mai Britt. And he ended up marrying her, actually. She was
Wow.
European. And you don't realize how serious this was back in 1960 that, today you don't even blink an eye at it. But back
Right.
then, they were giving death threats everywhere they went.
Wasn't it
and
illegal?
I don't know.
When did it
Obviously
become,
not.
I think it was, but at one point it was
Yeah.
illegal, but I
So-
don't know when that.
So anyway, he's
returned.
married to this woman. He has some kids with her,
Okay.
and then he's making movies and albums and dancing, Vegas, all this stuff. Because he made those movies with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack, Ocean's
Right.
11, and
course.
all that,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So they end up getting divorced in '68 because of Sammy's career. That he's out carousing and on tour, and he's
White
never
women.
home and everything. So they got divorced, and he's hanging around with what's his name? Martin Luther King.
Oh.
Wow.
And yeah, he went on that march to Washington.
Oh.
And he was very involved in that. So that's why I said he was a trendsetter, and he opened up all these doors that black performers were never allowed to get involved in any of these things. So he was a trendsetter, and he was, like I said, movies, stage. He had his own Broadway show. He had his own TV show, even one of the first. What's the guy? Nat King Cole had his first show in the
Variety?
50s, but Sammy had a show in 1966, I think it was. And it did not go over well, though, because of a whole bunch of stuff. Well, we'll have to do a whole show on that. But anyway.
I thought this was the Sammy Davis show.
But just on that show, why it
just on
didn't
that
go
show,
wong.
wow.
We can't fit it into 30 minutes. So anyway, he then marries this woman named Altavis, right? And we
Ooh,
all
I
remember
like
that
that.
name, right? And can you do an imitation of him saying Altavis? I always remember.
No, I don't even know what you're talking about.
His wife in the
maybe.
70s. He was always going around talking about Altavis. Altavis, give me a cup of tea. Altavis.
Was she a white?
No. She was a black girl.
He married a black girl
Yes,
after all
yes.
that?
Yeah.
Altavis.
He learned his lesson, I guess.
Wow.
And then,
My God.
although he did have a liaison with Linda Lovelace of the porn star
nice.
Deep Throat
Wow.
fame. Yes.
Wow.
I bet he did.
And then
Yeah.
he got involved in drinking and cocaine in the 70s and the late 60s.
He's just a mess.
Yeah, so his life went quickly downhill at that point. And he had poor health. He had to have 2 hip replacements. And then,
Or dancing, yeah.
yeah. So all through, like I said, all through the 70s, Sammy was everywhere. Anywhere you look, he
remember
was
him
on
on
these
Laugh-In.
shows. All right, yes. I want to talk about that. Let's
all right.
stop and talk about that now. All the TV shows, like I said, because he, like I said, paved the way, Sammy Davis Jr. for black people on TV. Like at that time, after his show came on, there was I Spy. Bill Cosby was on that. Then Bill Cosby got his own Cosby show, not the one in the 80s. There was one in the 60s. Do you remember that one? His name was Chet Kincaid in that one.
Wow.
And he played like a gym teacher or something.
Oh,
And then there was all these shows, Julia, Flip Wilson, Room 222.
Yes, that
And
one I
like
love.
you said, a Mod
Karen
Squad,
Valentine.
of course. That was a biggie.
Right,
Mission
right.
Impossible. And then we're going to talk about all these shows from the 70s. Let's talk about them now. The most famous episode of all time was All in the Family. February 19th, 1972,
Awesome.
which Sammy Davis was on the show. And somehow he forgot his briefcase in Archie's cab at the time, so he had to come to the house to pick it up.
Yes.
That seems a little far-fetched right there.
Right,
But
right.
anyway, it worked. And they were all excited, and he showed up. And I remember he was sitting there, and
In Archie's chair.
Yeah, and Archie kept telling everybody, "Don't say nothing about his eye. Don't say nothing about his eye." Right? And then they give him a cup of coffee, and Archie says to him, "Oh, would you like some cream and sugar in your eye?"
I don't remember that, but I remember the episode.
Yeah,
Well,
and then it was so funny that when Sammy first came in, all the kids were standing there. It was Lionel wanted to meet him next door, and it was Mike and Gloria, right? And then Archie says, there's my daughter Gloria, and there's her husband, Mike. And then Sammy Davis comes over to Lionel and says, "Oh, nice to meet you, Mike." And Archie goes, No, she's married to the white guy over there. And of course, the most famous part of the whole show, when at the end they take a picture and he kisses Archie.
Yes, that I
was
remember.
And
great.
it's immortalized in film.
Awesome.
Yes.
Forever.
Awesome.
That was the most famous scene of the 70s.
Yeah, that was
And
good
then-
stuff.
So I wanted, actually, we might have to, it's a good time to take a break now. We have all these songs that we need to get to.
Let's get to that.
All right, so let's play some more songs, and we'll get back to the rest of our show. How about this one? Was always a biggie for me in the 70s. I love this one. It was called "Living for the City" by Stevie Wonder.
Oh, yeah.
And they say bad words in that one. That's why I loved it as a kid. Yeah. And then, of course, Steven's favorite that he's going to take us out with. It's Beretta's Theme by Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
You know what the
Yeah.
name of that song is, though?
It's Sparrow?
Yeah,
Something with
keep
a
your
sparrow.
eye on the sparrow.
Yeah,
Isn't that
baby.
funny? Keep your
Yes.
eye. Another eye joke for
right.
Sammy.
I never even
The
thought of
jokes keep coming.
Yes.
You only got one.
And
so.
then we'll be right back. So, Steven,
Awesome.
take us out with a little Beretta's Theme.
Don't go to bed with no price on your head. Just don't do it. Oh.
Awesome. We'll be right back. And hey, welcome back. Madhouse Magazine Radio Hour, 474 The Mix. We just played 2 songs, Living for the City, Get in the Cell, Carol Ann, and Beretta's Theme by Sammy Davis Jr. So Stephen was just singing it again. He loves that song.
He knows the whole
You want to
song.
give us another line, Stephen?
My favorite is the end. Where can I go where the cold winds don't blow? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. That's the end. Great.
Good.
One of my favorite theme songs from the 70s.
Yeah, so now I want to talk about all these shows that we were watching in the 70s. There was a big time for black people on television. And I'm going to tell you my favorite show out of all of these. Let me name them, and we'll all name our favorite show. Sanford and Son, Good Times, Jefferson, What's Happening, Different Strokes, That's My Mama, Benson, Fat Albert. My favorite show was Sanford and Son, of course, out of all of those. That was like actually the first one of them. What was your favorite out of that list there, Stephen?
Loved Sanford and Son. What's Happening? I loved. It was so stupid. I don't know.
Good Times was pretty good,
yeah.
too.
The Good Times had the best theme song. The beginning and the end.
Yeah.
In the beginning there was one, and then at the end.
Yeah.
And
it was the girl from the Jeffersons singing it.
yes, or was that?
No, vice versa.
Right.
Right.
The girl from Good
Yes.
Times.
Yes.
Right.
Janet Dubois.
Thelma.
from Good
Jeanette
Times.
Dubois from Good Times. No, not Thelma.
Oh.
The other girl, Lawanda. What was
Who
her
the
name?
one that lived
Oh,
next
yeah,
door?
Wanda.
Penny's mom. What was her name?
Yeah. Oh, my
Thelma?
God. I can't
No,
believe it.
Thelma was the sister.
Thelma was the daughter, sister. Yeah. All right. We'll have to think about that.
Oh,
Winona.
it'll come to
Winona was her name.
Winona.
Was
Winona.
that it?
Yeah.
Winona, I think.
Winona. Yeah.
Winona.
Winona.
It's not a country
Oh,
Good
that's
Times.
Winona Ryder. Yeah, I'm thinking of that one. And
Yeah.
Bookman.
Keeping your head.
Yes, Bookman, Johnny Brown.
Buffalo
He was
Butt.
a big
Yes.
comedian back in the 60s and 70s. So, and that, remember that? The Dean Martin roast. I was watching that
Yeah,
last
oh my
night.
God.
A clip from the Sammy Davis Jr. Dean Martin roast. And it was Don Rickles up there roasting him.
Oh, nice.
And it was hysterical.
He was the best.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, I kid. No matter who it is, I kid the whites. I kid the purples. I kid the blacks too." And I said, "Well, mostly the blacks. I did." And it was like every line, 5 seconds,
yes.
it was another lightning fast line, and he was just
I
so
know
funny.
that roast. What you're talking about?
Yeah, and Wilt Chamberlain was on
Yes,
it.
and Nipsey Russell.
Nipsey
also.
Russell,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
that's where I
yeah,
got
know
that
exactly what you're
from.
talking
I
about.
love those two guys,
Yeah.
Nipsey Russell and Slappy White. That's why I dedicated the show to them. Yeah, so
He was some talent.
Oh,
Nipsey
and
Russell.
Freddie Prinze. We were discussing that before.
yes.
Freddie Prinze was on that show as well. And that was an awesome show. We have to do a whole show about that, I think.
Or the roasts? The
No,
Dean Martin
the
Or
roast and Freddie Prinze, Chico and the Man.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Good
That
stuff.
I haven't really seen that in reruns
No,
in
they
so
don't
many
play
years.
that,
I've never
right.
seen
I
it.
remember it, though.
Yeah.
Not
How
my
long
job,
was it
man.
on?
Not
Was
my
it on?
job.
Not very
man.
long because he
Yeah.
killed himself.
Yeah.
He was a
Right.
great up and coming comedian.
Yes, he
and,
was. That's
Remember Louis
true.
the Garbage Man with Scatman Crothers?
Scatman,
Yeah.
okay, yes.
Louis the Garbage Man. Also Hong Kong Phooey. That guy was Hong Kong Phooey. Scatman Crothers.
He got around, that
Yes,
guy.
yes.
All right, so let's come back now to Sammy and the rest of his life here. Like I said, when we last checked in with Sammy, this was in the 80s, all through the 70s. He had bad drinking, cocaine problems. Then he got bad health in the 80s. He had 2 hip replacements. And then, because he wasn't doing much, he was just doing like game shows and TV shows and things like that. But the Rat Pack had a reunion at this point in the 80s, and he was all excited. And he said, this is going to be awesome. And, they did. They did a short time. But then he ended up having throat cancer.
Oh, wow.
And he died at 64 in May 16th, 1990.
I didn't realize he was that young.
Right. And you know what happened? That because of unpaid taxes, his family had to auction off his estate.
Oh, man.
So they ended up with no money. That everything they had, like even photo albums they were selling and stuff to make money.
Wow.
Pay the IRS. So all of that.
Son of a gun.
He was the greatest entertainer of all time.
And a really horrible person.
And they took everything away from him. Sons of bitches.
Yeah, what a
But that's
shame.
why you better pay your taxes.
They'll always get you.
Like the mafia let him slide.
Yes,
Yes,
right.
But the IRS would not.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't care who you're married
Even
to.
after you're dead.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They took
damn
his
it.
glass eye even,
Yeah.
I heard.
It's got to be worth something.
Oh, what a shame. Poor kid.
Yeah, very sad, very
Yes,
sad.
yes.
It
But
is.
his legacy is, like I said, that all of these entertainers that came after him, like who was a good tap dancer. I'm totally against tap dancing, I
What's
got to
his
say.
name? Gregory Hines?
Ben Vereen first,
that's a
then
good
Gregory
one.
Hines,
Right,
then
right.
Savion Glover. All
I
these
don't know
people.
who that is.
He's Bring the Noise, Bring the Funk.
Yeah, I remember him on Sesame Street. So,
That's
I
great.
know you're talking
Bring the
about.
noise, bring the fun.
Tony Danza, not too bad either.
Is he a tap dancer?
Yeah, he was. He actually.
I think that
he tapped
I
it.
could actually be a tap dancer. That
yeah.
you just smack your feet around on the
Yeah,
floor.
yes.
There's no actual rhyme or
Smack
reason
your
to
feet
it.
around.
Yeah, anybody could do it.
Yeah, I don't
It's,
know.
no,
I don't
it's
know
a
about that.
skill.
I don't know about that.
I do.
He was a very talented guy, but I just don't think there's that much skill relating to tap dancing. You just.
Oh, here we go.
All right, next show. Me and Bello are going to be tap dancing.
Yes, I'm going actually to insist on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there you have it. That was the end of Sammy Davis Jr., the one-eyed Negro Jew from Harlem, New York City.
So now
Oh
what?
my
His
God,
mom
did
was
you
Jewish
call
and his
him a
dad was a
Negro?
black
No, he
dude, or-
actually he converted later
that's
on.
What it was, yes.
And
right.
it was it's a very interesting story about that. That friend Eddie Cantor, I can't believe I remember this guy's name
Wow.
from the 50s.
Yes.
That he was a Jewish actor, friend of his, and gave him a mezuzah.
A
I'm not
mezuzah?
really sure what that is, but I think you're supposed to hang it on your door. But
Oh.
instead, he made a medallion out of it, and he always wore it all around his neck.
Wow.
Oh.
And every day he wore it except one day, the day he got into the car
The day he
accident.
lost his eye.
Are you
Oh,
Swear to
serious?
God.
wow.
Nope, not making that up.
Wow.
I don't know if it's true, but that's what Sammy
Oh,
said.
my
I heard him saying it.
God.
So what do you
That
think of
is-
that?
That's
I
wow.
know.
The power of the
That's
mezuzah.
cool. Yes, that's freaky.
Don't mess with the mezuzah, Caroline.
Yeah, hail the mezuzah.
Giving you
Wow.
a mezuzah.
That's a good thing,
I
right?
don't know.
Giving you the horn.
So that's it. That's all I got about Sammy Davis Jr., the greatest entertainer of all time.
was
But
good. Good man.
Stephen, you had a story. Did you want to tell today that you were talking about? What's his name? Oh, what's the guy? The basketball player.
Magic Johnson?
Yeah, Magic Johnson.
Back in the 80s?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I don't know if this is true, but I heard this. That back in the 80s when Magic went for the HIV test,
Right.
he was nervous and everything. And the doctor came out and said, look, we got good news and bad news. So he says, wow, what's the good news? He says, the good news, you're going to live to be 80. Magic is like, that's amazing. I'm going to live to be 80. What could the bad news possibly be? The doctor says pounds. That's not even true. That didn't happen.
is.
But I'm bummed.
Yeah, but this is something. A guy's walking down the street and he sees a sign in a pet shop window, talking centipede, $500. He's like, that's a bargain. I'm going to get that centipede. So he goes and he buys the centipede. He brings it home in a box. He's all excited. He puts the centipede on the table and he says, I'm going to try this out. Hey, centipede, what do you say we go out and celebrate? So nothing, He doesn't, no response. He waits a few minutes. Centipede, come on, I want to take you down to the bar. We're going to buy a drink. Still nothing. Now he's starting to think he got ripped off. So he finally goes, yo, Centipede, let's go out and get a drink. Centipede sticks his head up. He goes, I heard you the first time. I'll put my shoes on.
That's really
That is
good.
beautiful.
You get it?
That's a
got
true
it.
story.
He's got a lot of
That's-
feet.
I
yes,
got it.
yes.
I got it.
Got like 100 of them.
He's got 100.
Could be even more than that.
I heard it. That makes me mad.
Yeah, so before we go out and
Love
wrap
it.
this show up, we got to discuss Cha-Cha and her
Leave me
hatred
alone.
for the show and her bringing the show down. You must be accounted for. You're trying to bring the show down, Cha-Cha.
I don't
Go.
see.
That every week before the show, oh, I'm so tired. I can't do the show. Oh, my makeup. Oh, my makeup. And then it's like, what's his name? Who did I say before? The DJ, Casey Kasem. Every week before the show, she gives me a dead dog dedication as I'm trying, 5 minutes before the show, as I'm trying to prepare to be funny. She's like, oh,
No.
I hate this show.
No, I never
hate
said
this
I
show."
hate the. No, that's not fair. I don't hate the show. It's just
It's you I hate.
I don't hate anything or anybody. It's just it's very late.
So would you
a
prefer we
busy
do the
woman.
show like on the weekends?
No, I don't know. I don't know.
All right, well, stay tuned to see if Cha-Cha will be back or not.
I can't believe you called me out.
All right, that's it. You must be called out. You
People
can't-
just on TV. People just go away.
No, that never happens.
That always happens.
On
What
what
do you
show?
mean?
Well,
On any show.
Yeah, and look at all the problems it caused when Darren went away on
Just thinking of
Bewitched.
Bewitched.
I'm still emotionally
Oh, yeah.
scarred by that.
Oh, so you're gonna get a new character? Is that what you said?
With the same name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
Anyone-
first name.
He can't remember it anyway.
Anyone named Cha-Cha would like to apply for the
Yes,
co-host
please.
position.
I'll
Please
be
write
holding
in.
interviews this week.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Madhouse Magazine Radio Hour 474 The Mix. See you next time. Let's hear it for us.
Yeah.
All right.